Hello everyone and welcome to my YouTube channel, Meet Me in the Center. My name is Andrew. Shadow, my cat, is not here right now. I just put out his food, so he's having a bit of a nosh. Those in the UK will probably understand that I had a very English upbringing. For anyone who didn't understand what I just said, he's having his dinner. And after his dinner, he likes to sunbathe in the window. So we probably won't see him, but you never know. So side note before we get started, this is actually me from the future. For some reason, I recorded this video and for whatever reason, the sound just didn't work on this video. I don't know why. It worked on the one before it and the one after it, but not this one. So I'm just refilming it because there was no way to save it, basically. So this is the continuation of Earth conservation and global climate change, and this is part 5, the politics of climate change. And this issue is completely political at this point. You're on one side or the other, and it has become completely black and white. Now, for most of this video, I will be referring to what's happening in the States. And by the way, it is my opinion that both the left and the right in the States are completely wrong when it comes to this issue. So I'm going to start with the Republicans. I've watched a lot of videos of Republican senators and House representatives talking about climate change. And honestly, as I'm watching them, I don't believe that they believe what they're saying. I think they're saying what they're being told to say by their donors and doing what their donors want, which is unfortunately not what is best for you, the people in the United States, or the United States or the world in general. And if you don't know why, there's nothing like that Coke money. If you know, you know. But the Democrats have their issues too. Unfortunately, if anyone logically points out any other variables other than human, they're automatically labeled as climate deniers, at which point they're never listened to and people think that they're just way out there far right people. Now, I read tons of scientific articles and literature on this topic because I actually enjoy learning about it and I want to be constantly informed of the new information that's coming out. I have read, I don't know, I couldn't even tell you how many, hundreds of articles, and I have not yet seen one scientist ever deny climate change in any of those articles. Now, I'm sure you could point out one or two of them, but that doesn't mean that all scientists are like that. There are reasons as to why they might deny climate change. Maybe they are in it just for the money that whomever is giving them to do the research. Maybe their way of collecting information was biased. Maybe their way of interpreting their information was biased. I don't know. The problem is I have never honestly seen it. Any good scientist knows that climate change exists. Climate is not static. It changes naturally. So climate change exists. Now, the problem is, like I said before, if they point out other variables, like the natural variables, and say, hey, this isn't just human, that means that they're working for oil companies or gas companies, or they're climate deniers, or it's just fake news. This is a huge issue. It's very, very damaging. It's eroding our faith in science and trust in facts. And I'm not going to go into that right now. It's a topic I think deserves its own video. I could talk about that forever. So I just want to quickly go over how a scientist publishes their information in peer-reviewed articles. Basically, if you are a scientist and you're publishing, you should be doing it in peer review, in my opinion. There are reasons not to. I don't want to go into like the finer details here. I'm just going to kind of give an overall explanation of it. But I trust peer-reviewed articles more than I trust non-peer-reviewed articles. So basically, a scientist, and I'm just going to use a very basic example for this. A scientist wants to go about proving that 1 + 1 = 2. So they do some experiments, some tests, and one of two things happens. They either find out that 1 + 1 does equal 2, or they find out that 1 + 1 = 3. Either way, they're going to write about it and try and get it published. Why is that? Well, because for the scientific community, the more you are published, the more you are established in that community. It's a way of more credit as a scientist if you've published a bunch. So they put in their findings, they write the article, they put in their findings, and it is reviewed generally by another scientist, or the publication has a team that reviews it, generally made up of mostly scientists. And the publication decides to publish it or not based on a report written by either the review board or the scientist reviewing it. And that just looks at, is the information they're saying, does it seem to be correct? Is it biased in some way that they didn't catch? That type of thing. Are there any flaws, basically? If there aren't, it gets published. So another scientist will read that and say, well, hold on a second. I don't think 1 + 1 = 2. I think 1 + 1 = 3. And so what they do is they set up a different experiment to try and prove that 1 + 1 = 3. And again, one of two things either happens. 1 + 1 = 2, and then they write about that, get it peer reviewed, and it basically becomes... So if you have a whole bunch of different tests that are done that prove the same thing, that basically helps to strengthen that idea, and it becomes more likely that is true. And if 1 + 1 = 3, they publish that, and they try to show that maybe that other report had flaws in some way. And why would they want to do that? Well, again, it comes down to that credit thing. They want that credit because that makes them a good scientist. And I have actually read articles written and by scientists who work for oil, gas, and mining. If they do research on something and they write an article about it, if they are working for an oil, gas, mining, or other things that affect climate change, they should be telling you that at some point in their article. But even then, all of those scientists that I've read agree that it exists. They're only challenging how much is man-made and how much is natural. So this, for me, is the real problem. For 20 years in the US, or for over 20 years actually, you guys have been arguing just on whether it exists or not. You're not talking about things you can do to change it. You just have certain politicians throwing snowballs or claiming it's a cold day in the winter. As someone with a brain, can someone else with a brain please explain to these people the difference between weather and climate change? You know what? I'll do it right now. Weather is the day-to-day that happens, and climate change is the trend over time, over multiple years. Basically, there's been a climate on this earth for billions of years at this point, and it changes. And so that's the climate change, and then humans are doing stuff on top of that. So what do I think needs to happen? I think we need to accept that it's happening, and we need to move on to how to figure out how much of an impact we're having and how to fix that impact. And a lot of people on the right here bring up an argument. I think it's a ridiculous argument. China won't change, so why should we? Now, China is the number one CO2 emitter in the world. US is right behind them. But this is just a way of distracting and moving away from the issue at hand. Any amount of change is going to help. And if you put that argument that they use into other issues that are happening, you kind of start to see how ridiculous it is. So for instance, should we not pick up litter because some people are going to litter anyway? So, what's the point? should we not try to reduce the number of teens who smoke? Because, some are going to still smoke. So who cares if we save some people, others are still going to die. Again, ridiculous. And like I said, it's just a distraction. But I honestly think, and this is mainly to the left here, I honestly think a lot more people are going to join this discussion if you say that there is a natural cycle that happens, but then explain that humans are having an impact on top of that, which is making the temperature go higher much faster. If you continue to say that it's only humans that affect climate change, you're not just losing Republicans, you're losing a lot of well-educated people who know the most about climate change, because it's not all humans. It's not all human impact. So again, let's figure out how much impact humans are making and then lower that. We don't know. We can kind of estimate how much carbon dioxide we're putting into the atmosphere, but we haven't yet figured out how much of an impact that will have and how long it will take to see all of that effect. So if it turns out that we're only having like a 10% more impact, we're not going to have to go to such extreme levels as if we're actually having 100% more impact on raising temperatures. So again, let's start having that reasonable conversation about solutions that can positively affect our impact on climate change, no matter how big or how small they are, that aren't going to scare away anyone except the extremes on either side. You're not going to get everyone to a discussion, but if you can get most people, that's where you're going to have the most different ideas. And that's how we're going to find solutions. And some places are already doing things to help. And to them, bravo. A lot of places have gone to more renewable energy production. There are issues with those as well. Nothing is perfect, but they are having an impact on how much carbon dioxide is being emitted. So bravo for that. And some places are trying. And I'm going to say bravo for that too. Not every idea we have is going to work perfectly. It's just not. It's better to try, learn from your mistakes, and make a better solution. And I think what happened in Canada with the Canadian carbon tax is actually an example of this. When it came out, it was a liberal platform in one of the federal elections in Canada. And actually, in that election, I did vote Liberal. Not solely for the Canadian carbon tax. I thought they also had other good platforms that they were going to quote unquote focus on. But basically what the Canadian carbon tax is it just taxes the amount of carbon or carbon dioxide is emitted to create and transport items that are sold to consumers. So basically, it's an incentive to try to make companies more greener. But unfortunately, what has happened is the cost has just been put on the average person in Canada. The companies decided they weren't going to do anything to make themselves greener, and the people could pay for it instead. And unfortunately, instead of doing anything to try and challenge that, most people just kind of took the added money and said, oh, well, it's a bit more expensive now. So it was a good idea. Maybe it needs tweaking a little bit. I don't know how you would do that personally. Maybe someone has a good idea on how that could be. But that is the end of this video. So if you liked it, hit the like, hit subscribe, and leave a comment if you want. If not, hey, it's completely up to you. Don't worry about it. Until my next video, I hope you have a good day, week, or month, or however long before you watch another one. And until then, bye for now.